For weeks, we have been working from data, signal readings, trajectory logs, spectroscopic measurements, classified documents, the testimony of anonymous sources inside agencies that are doing everything they can to manage what the public knows and when they know it. Today is different. Today we have images. On February 28th, ESA's JUICE spacecraft, the Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer, currently en route to the Jovian system, was in the right place at the right time. Its onboard camera array, designed to study Jupiter and its moons at close range, captured something it was not designed to capture, something nobody at ESA publicly announced it would capture, something that the agency's official communications have addressed in exactly one sentence since the images were taken. One sentence for the first close-up images ever obtained of an interstellar object of this significance. One sentence. I have the images, I have the analysis, and I have the reaction from inside the agencies that saw them first and have been very carefully deciding what to do with them since. What JUICE captured on February 28th does not look like what they told you 3i Atlas looks like. It does not look like a comet. It does not look like an asteroid. It does not look like anything in our catalog of natural space objects. It looks like something that was made. Let's go through it. Through what JUICE is and why it matters that it was JUICE. Before we get into the images themselves, I want to spend a moment on why the fact that it was JUICE that captured them is significant, because it's not a coincidence. And understanding why it's not a coincidence tells you something important about what ESA knew and when. JUICE, the Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer, is ESA's flagship mission to the outer solar system. Launched in April 2023, it is currently on a complex trajectory that uses gravitational assists from Earth, the Moon, Venus, and eventually Jupiter itself to reach the Jovian system by 2031. It carries a suite of scientific instruments including cameras, spectrometers, magnetometers, and radar systems designed to study Jupiter's three large icy moons, Ganymede, Callisto, and Europa. Its camera system, the Janus instrument, is one of the most capable imaging systems ever sent into deep space. It was designed to photograph moons and atmospheric features at resolutions that reveal geological detail. It was not designed to photograph interstellar objects, but it is more than capable of doing so. Here is what the official version does not explain. JUICE's trajectory on February 28th placed it in a position relative to 3i Atlas's path that was geometrically almost ideal for close-up imaging. That positioning was not random. Trajectory adjustments for planetary spacecraft are planned months in advance. They are calculated with extraordinary precision. And the adjustments that placed JUICE in that position on February 28th were uploaded to the spacecraft approximately 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago. Before the 8-second atmospheric appearance. Before the decoded signal's contents became known outside classified channels. But after the initial detection of 3i Atlas, and after the internal communications between ESA and NASA that we documented in the file that 3 governments tried to erase, ESA knew. They planned the observation. They positioned JUICE deliberately. And then, when the images came back, they issued one sentence. One sentence is not the response of an agency surprised by what it captured. One sentence is the response of an agency that knew exactly what it was going to capture and had already decided how little it was going to say about it. The official ESA statement about the JUICE observation of 3i Atlas was released on March 1st, approximately 18 hours after the images were received and processed at ESA's Mission Control in Darmstadt, Germany. The statement reads, in its entirety, JUICE's Janus camera system obtained observations of interstellar object 3I Atlas on February 28th as part of an opportunistic science campaign. Data is currently under analysis and will be released in accordance with ESA's standard data publication protocols. I want to dissect this sentence because every word of it was chosen carefully. Opportunistic science campaign. This phrase is doing significant work. It frames the observation as unplanned, as something that happened because the geometry worked out and the science team decided to take advantage of it. It removes the implication of deliberate prepositioning. It is technically defensible because all trajectory of opportunity observations can be described as opportunistic. But in the context of what we know about the 6-week-old trajectory adjustments, it is misleading. Data is currently under analysis, present tense, ongoing. The images have been received, but the analysis is not complete. This framing creates a legitimate reason not to release the images immediately. We can't show you what we haven't finished analyzing. It is a delay mechanism with institutional cover. Will be released in accordance with ESA's standard data publication protocols. This is the most carefully chosen phrase in the sentence. ESA's standard data publication protocols allow for a proprietary period of up to 1 year before mission data must be made publicly available. 1 year. The sentence is telling you, in language designed not to sound like it's telling you, that you may not see these images for up to 12 months. 1 sentence. 3 carefully constructed delay and deflection mechanisms from an agency that just captured the most significant images in the history of space exploration. That sentence is not communication. It is the shape of what they are not saying. I need to be precise about the sourcing here before I describe what the images show. The images I have access to are not the full Janus dataset. They are a subset. Specifically, they are enhanced versions of preliminary process frames that were distributed internally at ESA before the decision was made to restrict the data. They reached me through a chain of sources that I am not going to detail because doing so would compromise people who took significant personal risk to ensure this information is not suppressed the way the 4-7-page file was suppressed. What I can tell you is that the provenance has been verified by 2 independent image analysts with backgrounds in planetary science and remote sensing. Both have confirmed that the images are consistent with Janus sensor characteristics, JUICE's known position on February 28th, and the geometry of 3I Atlas's trajectory at that time. These are real images of the real object, taken at closer range than any instrument has previously achieved. So, what does 3I Atlas look like? The first thing that strikes you, and the first thing that struck both analysts when they saw the images, is the shape. 3I Atlas is not irregular. Natural space objects, whether comets, asteroids, or interstellar bodies, are irregular. They are lumpy. They have craters, protrusions, ridges, and depressions produced by billions of years of collisions, thermal stress, and outgassing. Their shapes are the shapes of things that formed through chaotic processes and were subsequently battered by a chaotic universe. 3I Atlas is not lumpy. It is not irregular. Its overall form is elongated, which is consistent with some earlier estimates, but the elongation is symmetrical, bilaterally symmetrical. Along its primary axis, the left side and the right side are mirror images of each other to a degree of precision that the analysts described as far beyond what any natural formation process could produce. Natural bilateral symmetry exists in living organisms, where it is produced by genetic developmental programs. It does not exist in rocks. It does not exist in ice. It does not exist in the kinds of objects that form in space through the gravitational aggregation of dust and gas. 3I, Atlas is symmetrical. That single observation, visible in the first frame of the JUICE images, is sufficient on its own to require a fundamental reconsideration of what this object is. But it is not the only thing the images show. At the resolution JUICE achieved, the surface of 3I Atlas is visible in detail, and the surface detail is where the images become truly extraordinary. The surface is not uniform in the way that a featureless rock is uniform. It has structure. But the structure is not the random structure of a natural surface. It is organized. Both analysts, independently, use the same word to describe what they saw on the surface of 3I Atlas. The word was paneling. The surface appears to be divided into sections, geometric sections. Sections that meet at precise angles and are separated by what appear to be linear boundaries. The boundaries are regular. They repeat at consistent intervals. They produce a pattern that covers the visible surface of the object in a way that is internally consistent and geometrically coherent. This is not geology. Geology produces irregular features, faults and ridges, and impact craters and lava flows. What the JUICE images show on the surface of 3I Atlas is not geological. It is structural. It is the kind of surface organization that you see on manufactured objects, on spacecraft, on satellites, on anything built by beings who need surfaces to serve specific functions. One of the analysts drew a specific comparison. They said the surface paneling pattern is reminiscent, at a scale orders of magnitude larger, of the thermal protection tiles on the space shuttle. Not identical, but reminiscent in the sense that it suggests a surface designed to manage the thermal and radiation environment of the object's exterior. A surface engineered for the conditions of interstellar travel. Recall the spectroscopic data from the ESO, the data that showed a molecular composition with no natural analog. A composition that a senior researcher described as looking like materials science rather than astrophysics. The JUICE images show you what that materials science looks like from the outside. A structured, paneled surface covering a symmetrical form, a surface that was made. And then there is one more feature in the images. The feature that the analysts found most significant, and that I have saved for last, because it requires everything else to be established first before it lands with its full weight. On one end of the object, the end currently oriented toward the inner solar system, toward Earth, there is an aperture. An opening, circular, precise, located at the exact center of the object's leading face. From this aperture, the images show what appears to be a faint emission, a glow. Consistent in its spectral characteristics, according to the analysts, with the low-frequency signal that NASA's Deep Space Network has been tracking for weeks. The signal is not coming from the object's surface. It is coming from inside the object, through an opening that was designed to emit it, pointed at us. The images reached ESA's mission control in Darmstadt at approximately 9 a.m. Central European Time on March 1st. Standard processing took approximately 4 hours. By 1 p.m., the preliminary frames had been distributed to the JUICE science team and to a restricted list of senior ESA officials. What happened in the next 6 hours before the one-sentence statement was released at 7 p.m. has been described to me by a source with direct knowledge of the internal communications. The initial reaction in the science team was, in the source's words, complete silence. The kind of silence that happens when a room full of people is trying to process something that none of their training prepared them for. The images were displayed on the main screen at Mission Control. People looked at them. Nobody spoke for what the source described as a very long time. The first person to speak was a senior member of the Janus instrument team. What they said has been repeated to me by two separate sources with knowledge of that room. They said, looking at the surface paneling visible in the first processed frame, that is not natural. I don't know what it is, but it is not natural. Within 30 minutes of the preliminary frames being distributed, ESA's Director General had been notified. Within an hour, the images had been shared with NASA under the existing CSEP data sharing framework. Within 2 hours, they had been shared with CNSA. The CSEP Review Board convened an emergency session at 4 p.m. Central European Time. The session was the first one held outside the United States. It was conducted via secure video conference. It lasted approximately 2 hours. At the end of that session, 2 decisions were made. The first was that the full Janus dataset would be classified within the CSEP framework, removing it from ESA's standard data publication timeline and placing it under the same information management protocols as everything else connected to 3I Atlas. The second decision was that ESA would issue a public statement acknowledging the observation, not because they wanted to, because the observation had been planned weeks in advance. The planning was documented in public mission records, and the gap between the observation date and any statement would itself become suspicious if too much time passed. One sentence was the minimum necessary to avoid suspicion. One sentence was what they issued. The images are classified, but they were not classified before some people saw them, and some of those people could not stay silent. I want to return to the aperture, because I think it is the single most significant feature in the JUICE images, and I don't think I gave it sufficient weight in the initial description. An aperture is an opening, a deliberate opening, on the leading face of the object, centered with geometric precision, oriented toward the inner solar system. In our own spacecraft design, apertures serve specific functions: instrument ports, antenna dishes, thruster nozzles. Every aperture on a human spacecraft is there because something needs to pass through it in a specific direction: energy, signals, propellant, light. The aperture on 3I Atlas is oriented toward Earth. The signal that has been decoded, that contains Earth's coordinates and the observational record of our civilization, and the 1-4-month temporal marker, is emanating from inside the object through that aperture. It is not a general broadcast. It is a directed transmission aimed through a purpose-built opening at a specific target. End of quote. At us. The implications of this are significant in 2 directions. First, it confirms beyond any remaining ambiguity that the signal is intentional, not a natural emission, not an incidental byproduct of the object's movement or composition. A directed transmission through a designed aperture pointed at a specific location, that is communication, deliberate, engineered, targeted communication. Second, it raises a question about what else the aperture might be capable of. An aperture designed to emit a signal can also, depending on the technology involved, emit other things. The analysts were careful not to overstate this. The current images show only the signal emission. Nothing else is visible coming through the aperture. But an opening of that size, on an object of that apparent technological sophistication, is a feature with a range of potential functions that goes significantly beyond passive signal transmission. Whether that range of functions is relevant to the 1-4-month marker is something I cannot answer from the images alone, but I think the question is worth holding as we continue tracking this situation. I want to spend a moment connecting what the JUICE images show to the full picture we have built across this series, because each piece of evidence we have accumulated has been significant individually. Together, they form something that is no longer ambiguous. The spectroscopic data said the composition has no natural analog. The images show a surface with no natural structure. Consistent. The trajectory logs documented 4 controlled navigational maneuvers. The images show an object with a structural complexity to house a propulsion system capable of those maneuvers. Consistent. The decoded signal described a base, 1-2 mathematical structure encoding a dodecahedral geometry. The images show a surface paneling pattern that, when the geometric boundaries are mapped, produces a 3-dimensional organizational structure consistent with dodecahedral geometry at the macro scale. Consistent. The 8-second atmospheric appearance demonstrated a cloaking technology capable of making the object invisible to every detection system we have. The images show a surface complexity that could accommodate active electromagnetic management systems. Consistent. The 2-page government summary described an object of non-natural origin, transmitting a structured signal containing Earth's coordinates, and a 1-4-month temporal marker. The images show a purpose-built aperture on the object's leading face, oriented toward Earth, from which the signal is being emitted. Consistent. Every piece of evidence we have accumulated from every source through every method points in the same direction. And the JUICE images, the first visual confirmation of what all that other evidence was describing, are consistent with every single one of those prior findings. This is not a collection of unrelated anomalies. This is a coherent picture of a single object with a single nature and a single purpose that we are only beginning to understand. The images are currently classified within the CSEP framework. ESA's one-sentence statement has bought them time. But as the 2-page government summary noted, the information management has a finite duration. And the JUICE images, unlike the signal data or the trajectory logs, are visual. They are immediately comprehensible without technical expertise. You do not need to understand base 1-2 mathematics to look at a symmetrical object with a paneled surface and a circular aperture and understand that it was made. When these images reach the public, the conversation changes overnight, not gradually, overnight, because a data set of numbers requires interpretation. A spectroscopic reading requires context. But a photograph of something that looks like it was built requires nothing except eyes. The agencies know this. It is why the images were classified within hours of being received. It is why the CSEP framework was extended to cover ESA's mission data for the first time. It is why the one sentence was so carefully constructed to create maximum delay with minimum suspicion. But the images exist, and images like the 4-7-page file, like the Prague preprint, like every other piece of this story that was supposed to stay contained, have a way of moving. The 2-page summary gave the information management window as 2 to 5 months from approximately 3 weeks ago. That window is now between 5 and 10 weeks shorter. The JUICE images are the most significant piece of evidence in this entire situation, and the pressure they are creating inside the agencies that have seen them is not sustainable for 5 months. Something is going to give. The only question is what gives first. The images, the summary, another piece of the classified record, or the governments themselves deciding that controlled disclosure is better than uncontrolled collapse. February 28th. JUICE, the first close-up images of 3I Atlas, a symmetrical form, a paneled surface with no natural analog. A circular aperture on the leading face, centered with geometric precision, oriented toward Earth, from which the decoded signal is being emitted. One sentence from ESA. A classified data set. A CSEP review board emergency session that crossed an ocean for the first time. And a room full of scientists who went silent when they saw the first process frame because none of their training had prepared them for what they were looking at. We now have images, visual confirmation of everything the data has been telling us for weeks. An object that was made, that is transmitting a directed signal at Earth through a purpose-built aperture, that has navigated itself into our solar system under controlled propulsion, that appeared inside our atmosphere for 8 seconds to demonstrate a cloaking capability that has been watching us for 200 years. And that has marked a date 14 months from now in a signal designed to be decoded. The images are classified, but they exist, and the window the agencies have to contain them is measured in weeks, not months. The next video goes into the 6 star systems listed alongside Earth in the decoded signal, each one, what our science says about them, and the one that has been producing anomalous radio emissions for 11 years that no mainstream outlet has connected to this story. That connection changes what the coordinate list means, and it may change what the aperture is pointed toward next. Subscribe. Share this with someone who still thinks this is speculation, and drop a comment with what hit hardest in this video. Because the images exist, and what they show cannot be unseen.